Hey everyone, just a quick warning, this episode does have explicit language and may not be appropriate for kids. Do you think you've changed?
Yeah, I mean, in certain elements of me. But no, I mean, am I still crazy? Yeah. I mean, I don't think anybody that really knows me thinks I'm a bit nuts, but...
Do you still look for angles? Like subconsciously?
I can't stop looking at angles at everything, dude.
Always?
Well, it depends.
That's just hard baked into you?
I'm always looking at angles. Yeah, it doesn't matter usually what it is.
Do you ever want to shut that off or no? That's just who you are.
Well, I mean, angles is what gives me an advantage. Really, it's just like the only advantage I've ever had has just been like a fucking really obsession. And yes, it's a horrible way to live. I mean, there's some elements of it that's good. It's super interesting to other people, I guess. But it gets really exhausting at times. But, you know, I'm a liability. I'm crazy. I mean, that's proven. You go onto Google, it will tell you.
My name is Nate Scott. I'm a reporter and editor at For the Win and USA Today Sports. This is The Sneak. You might be wondering how Anthony has gotten on since he was released from prison. First off, I will say, Anthony and his wife, they're still together. He says there was a time they were separated while he was in prison, but they have reconciled. He lives with his family in the affluent town of Redmond, Washington, and the reason they can afford to live there is just as strange as everything else in this saga. Unfortunately, out in Monroe, Anthony told us the bulk of this story over lunch when we weren't recording. But I called him after our trip and had him recount what happened. See, it started with him drawing, back in prison.
I got better, as time went on, and then I got released from prison. I think I had already tried pitching books while I was in there, and all I got was rejection, and they're all form rejection letters.
Yeah,
it was the greatest thing. One time I got a handwritten rejection letter, and I was like, "Oh my God, I did it!" It was like I was so excited about a handwritten rejection letter.
Anthony was drawing freehand and then scanning the illustrations, but he realized the quality of the books he was sending out wasn't good enough. So he taught himself Adobe Illustrator by watching YouTube videos. Still, even then, nothing. So he started self-publishing on Amazon.
I remember it was for a whole year, I had 8 sales. I think this was 2 books, 8 sales, and 7 of them came from the Seattle area. And then it was a month after I did that, my grandma's like, "Oh, I got several of your books for blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Oh, shit." The only one buying my books is my grandma.
Anthony kept up at it. He wasn't making any money, but he enjoyed it. To keep food on the table, he got a landscaping job, and they scraped by. Then one day, he watched a basketball game. It was the 2016 NBA Finals.
I'm looking at it, and there's this little tiny guy, you can't tell what he is, and he was shooting shots from just an insane distance. I'm like, what in the hell is at the end of the game?
Anthony realized it was Stephen Curry. Curcio remembered him from the 2008 NCAA tournament when Curry was an undersized shooter for Davidson, but he had no idea that Curry had become one of the best players in the NBA. How would he? Anthony had been in prison.
I'm watching him in the NBA Finals, a guy that I thought that, was going to be too small to ever perform at the NBA level, tear up the best player in the NBA, the best player in the world, LeBron James. People consider him better than Michael Jordan. And right then was like, you know what? I'm going to make a children's book about Stephen Curry because he's such a great story.
Curcio did. He wrote it, illustrated it too.
The title was the one thing that I loved the most, and it was The Boy Who Never Gave Up, the Stephen Curry children's book. I mean, The Boy Who Never Gave Up is a great title.
It is. Give the man credit. He published the book himself on Amazon and figured that would be it. He'd get some author copies for his daughter's basketball team. Maybe he'd sell some copies to his grandma. But then something happened.
that November, what had happened was the NCAA was doing a national reading program.
As part of this program, the NCAA sent coaches and players around the country to read to young kids at schools. At these events, local media would come to cover it. And you can probably guess what book they picked to read.
Overnight, everything dramatically changed. It went from me selling at most 5 copies a day. I went to selling probably 200, 300 copies a day.
Curcio's book became an Amazon bestseller. It still is a bestseller, 3 years later. He's published other coloring books about other athletes in sports and has since signed a book deal to publish a Steph Curry book for young adults. That's how he bought the gym, moved to Redmond. That book changed everything. Anthony has cleaned his life up. He's a successful author and businessman who volunteers with his kids' sports teams. But there was still a side of him I couldn't ignore. A side that got a thrill from doing what he wasn't supposed to do. From ignoring the signs telling us to stay away from the river, to his secret room which violated the building code, to the drone he delighted in flying everywhere he wasn't supposed to, Anthony still gets a rush bending the rules. It made me worry. Was Anthony as done with crime as he wanted me to believe? Do you ever think about going back?
No. I mean, the way I see it is there's way more, from the financial aspect of it, hell no. I think there's way more money to be made legally, period. There's way more. The only element would be the risk. I mean, the risk. Yeah, I mean, that's exciting to me for sure because it's like a game. I mean, it is. It's a game, and it can be a fun one because it's very exciting. Like whenever you gamble, it's not near as much fun when you only got $5 on the table, and if you put, 500 on the table, you're beating a little faster. Dealer shows a freaking king. It's like shit. I mean, that is like a game that I like to play, but no, I don't. I spent 15 years in that lifestyle. And I've spent some time in this lifestyle, and I compare the two, and I feel a lot better about myself now. And that's really, isn't that what it's about? It's about being happy, right? So I can't say that I was happy back then at all.
And you still, you duped that building inspector with your
I did.
room. And
I
that
did.
Gave you a little?
It did. Yep, not gonna lie, it was nice. It was a lot of joy. I was very happy when he didn't. And I tell the story because I'm excited about it. I'm sharing it with somebody because there's not anybody to share it with. But it's not like I'm so out there that I don't stop and I think about my consequences. I do. I mean, I'm not. Another thing about removing me from society and my addiction and pushing pause on my life when I went to prison was I was finally able to see A causes C rather than A gets me B. You know what I'm saying? I could only see that before the immediate results. Whereas being pulled away from everything, I'm just if I do this, yeah, I feel better, but only for a second, and then ultimately the consequences come, which really is addiction in itself.
This is something that is important to Anthony's story, and I think something we have to remind ourselves with him constantly. Anthony is an addict. And I know I've glossed over that part a bit, mostly because I was distrustful of the media narrative around this story. But it's the fact of the matter. Anthony was and is an addict. And we can break down his diagnoses and look at his personality and the people around him, but without his addiction, it's hard to see how any of this would have happened. This is from my conversation with the prosecutor on this case, Assistant U.S. Attorney Bruce Miyake.
He was a person who was suffering quite a bit from drug addiction. If he had not been addicted to drugs, he would not have committed these crimes at all. but it really took him to a very dark place.
That addiction is what keeps his family concerned about him.
A lot of people see addiction as a moral failing.
This is the voice of Anthony's cousin, Brianne Peters.
I mean, there are times that people turn to drugs because they were traumatized as children. In Anthony's case, that was not the situation. He had a chemical imbalance in his brain. He still has a chemical imbalance in his brain, and he used drugs to cope with that.
Forgive me for asking this, but you have these episodes of high creativity. Do you then have come downs and the low where you'll shut down for a little while after that, or does it just keep going?
I'm like a manic. I've been diagnosed all this. I've been diagnosed all kinds of shit. Definitely have like anxiety. Yes and no. Like, I don't know.
Do you buy into the diagnosis?
I don't really give a fuck what anybody with the doctors and the shit. They threatened to throw me in the shoe if I didn't take lithium in prison.
Again, the Bureau of Prisons declined to be interviewed for this podcast, citing policy to not comment on former inmates.
This was after I came out of the shoe. And I was just like, fuck you. I mean, really. I was so scared of going into the shoe. Then I went into the shoe. And I think, I don't know if I buy it. They say that like 90% of bank robbers are manic depressants or bipolar or whatever. I'm sure I'm a little bit manic. And I've definitely had like depressed moments in my life.
Anthony isn't just drawing books nowadays. He's also done some motivational speaking. He appeared on this podcast. He's doing his best to own this story, to use it to spread a message. And for plenty of people around this case, this is wonderful. Have you heard about how Anthony is doing now?
I have.
Again, this is prosecutor Bruce Miyake.
Somebody said he had written a book or something.
He's written many books, children's books, some of which have sold very well.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, I the way I feel about it, it's his story. He's the one who went through this. He paid the price. And if he's using it to spread a positive message or the correct message, I have no problem with that.
Detective Tim Bazell concurs to a degree.
He's contacted me and tried to contact me. And I heard about his coloring books or the books he's doing for kids. So I hear that stuff, but yeah.
He wanted us to get you two together on camera.
Yeah. No.
I figured that would be your answer.
You know, he might be, like I said, he may not ever commit another crime, and that's good. And I hope so. I hope him and his family work out and things go good for him. I really do.
Not everyone is fine with this, however. Remember Mitch Ruth, the eyewitness to this crime? He's not okay with any of this. He's not okay with what he views as Anthony profiting off this crime. He's not okay with me making this podcast. You wanted to ask me some questions about this.
Right. Why do people still care about this? Why is he being celebrated with the time, the effort, the money that it must take for you and all the production work and how valuable airtime is? Why do people want to celebrate that?
You think it's celebratory?
Yes.
Even telling the story?
Yes.
Interesting.
I do. Because there's so many other people who are worthy of being celebrated, who do good things. We spend more time on the negative than the positive.
You don't think that there is a value in, let's call them cautionary tales?
Possibly. But let's go back to the positive stuff too.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen, maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's television, him doing children's stuff. And I watched him laughing and joking with children about the bad things he had done. It's not right.
So the fact that it happened 2 days after the bailout, and he stuck it to Bank of America, you still didn't have any, there was no Robin Hood. This was not a Robin Hood.
He wasn't Robin Hood. He didn't steal that to give to the poor. He wasn't trying to feed the homeless. He was feeding his addiction. You know, it was a recession. It was a time when it was economically, troubled. I think many people don't have a problem per se with robbing banks. No, I know it wasn't a bank, armored car, but call it the same kind of a thing. I think that's a sad statement of society. That's our money. It's not the bank's money, it's our money. We have an account there. That's ours. So, you don't just turn the other cheek and go, well, it's corporate. Oh, it's this, it's that. Who cares? We care.
It seems like a fitting moment to remind you all that this wasn't a victimless crime. There was a victim. The Brinks truck employee, Gerardo Willie Valdez. Valdez did not respond to emailed requests to be interviewed for this podcast, but we heard from multiple people around the case that he had suffered PTSD after Curcio attacked him. They also told us he never went back to work with Brinks. What's something you want our listeners to know about Monroe? This is not a good story about Monroe.
No, it's not.
You told us the barn, about the raising of that barn. Is the spirit of the town that built someone's home when their home burned down, is that spirit still alive in Monroe?
Oh, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. It's a more of an old school small town mentality. Yes, we're growing and we have growing pains, but we're not leaving all of that behind. But we have good people here, a lot of good people, and I won't stand and be a victim, nor will I stand and watch other people be victimized either. So, I'm a little old to be trying to, change clothes in a phone booth and pretend I'm something I'm not, but I'll still do what I can do as long as I can do it. And I believe the majority of people here will too. And it's not just men. The women stand up, and it's a good town. It's a good town.
My summer with Anthony Curcio was one I will not soon forget. And after all this, I'm still not sure about a lot of things. I'm not sure if this is Anthony's story to own. I'm not entirely sure if he's as changed a man as he says he is. I want to believe him, but again, I'm not sure. There is one thing I am sure about, however. See, Anthony is a man of projects. He gets excited about things. Legos, drones, secret rooms. But then he gets bored, and he drops them. He doesn't do that with his family, though. Anthony has been in love with the same woman since he was 15 years old. He's a devoted father, a constant presence in his kids' lives. When he talks about his family, about what might have happened if he never got clean, it's different.
This is just, had that continued, my daughters do not know me. They don't know that, there's the memories that are painful for me are the memories when my daughter, is 2 and is like on the other side of those little gates that you put up in the hallway and is like, Daddy, 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 come here and, just wanting to hang out. And it's like, I love her, but I'm being fucking pulled outside because I have to go get wherever the fuck I hid this shit. And it's just, it sucks. I chose fucking drugs over everybody. And it just destroyed me. It destroyed me as a person to the point where I am infamous for a fucking armored car robbery. I mean, this is from a boy that wanted to play football like his dad, you know, and that was it. It was like, whatever. I mean, it's just like, but, you know, whatever I am infamous for because of what happened, I was able to change, and there was motivation to change, and it wasn't the fucking prison system. It was my family, and I was gonna change no matter what. And my kids don't know that person. And so they know a father who's encouraging, who's loving, who's protecting. And I have everything I need. I do.
Anthony says he now has everything he needs. This wasn't always the case. With Anthony, his downfall came first from his need for drugs, and then his need to impress people, maintaining a lifestyle he couldn't afford. The robbery came apart from his need for a project, an obsession, that deep desire to do something big, bold, audacious. Then it was about his need to see it through, to actually commit the crime, even when his conscience should have told him to stop. Maybe this project has always been about needs. The media needed a story, and Anthony gave it to them. It wasn't exactly the full story, but hey, there were deadlines to hit. And we all needed a story. Something to read about, pass the time. A story that was wild, romantic, and strange. A story of a desperate man, a broken financial system, a drug crisis, and a big old bag of money floating down a river. We'd see the story, pass it along to our friends. Here, we'd say, you need to see this. The Sneak is a project of For the Win and USA Today Sports. It is produced by myself, along with Anthony Pachillo and Pat Shanahan. Audio engineering and sound design from Chris Bowerbank, and our sound recordist is Josh Savare. Research and additional production from Daniela Schneider. Our executives are Kate Gutman and Mark Hyland. Thanks to Emmanuel Lozano, Joe Myers, and the Monroe Police Department.
Hey sports fans, if you want to see more videos like this, check out some of our other ones right here. And if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and stick around for more from USA Today Sports.